So, second part of this is construction due diligence. So what do we mean by that? So I guess the kind of key thing is construction you could wrap up not only with construction itself, but it's like almost what happens before construction. So all the things that you've got to do in terms of planning, building regulations, surveys, reports that you get generated. So this little video is going to give you a flavour for what's involved in that. So let's start with the first part. So planning. When you receive planning on a site, you get a decision notice that highlights all the things that the planners need to be satisfied with before you can make a material start on site. So when it comes to the conditions on your decision notice, they're listed in order. The planners want you to go through and supply them with a whole pile of information. So each of these things in and of themselves are a form of due diligence, because as you layer up the information flow or within the actual project, you're learning more and more and more about what you're doing. It's becoming more and more specific. The more specific you can make this, the more you can nail everything down to the nuts, the bolts, the individual bricks, and what you're actually building, the various surveys that they require. That is all really important. You've got planning, you've got your conditions, you now need to satisfy building regulations so that the thing that you're going to build is compliant with the current edition of building regulations. So at the moment that requires things like satisfying the local authority that you are, for example, not in a flood risk zone. So one of the ways you do that, which again is a big part of your due diligence, is you would commission an engineer to do a flood risk survey. So he would assess what was involved, he would come back with a report, and he would tell you not only whether you were in such a zone, the likelihood of it flooding. And nowadays we've got things like, for example, in England, I think at the moment it's sort of 1 in 100-year storms that they've got to model for, plus 25% for global warming. In Scotland it is a 1 in 200-year storm plus 40% for global warming. So plainly, where I'm from, in Scotland it is much more onerous, that particular thing, in terms of what you've got to design. All of these things can, broadly speaking, be overcome, but you have to design what you build a certain way. So another form of due diligence, and I'm not going to list hundreds of these, I'm just going to pick out these two in particular. Another one is what's under the ground. So pretty much in construction, the one thing that you can guarantee, if you're going to lose money, generally you lose it under the ground. So the way that we would mitigate against that and be very clear on that is to do two types of site investigation, typically phase 1, phase 2. Let me just explain what these are. So phase 1 is like a desktop survey, and that's where an engineer, a geological engineer, would look at the geological strata based on information from the British geological surveys that have been done over the, assuming indeed the land is in Britain, in the UK. That would inform what actually is what you're going to be building on top of. So that's important. He can then come up with some preliminary reports or recommendations on the back of that. Generally speaking, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen it any other way. Generally speaking, that preliminary report or preliminary recommendation would be do a phase 2. A phase 2 is an intrusive site investigation, and that's where you're looking at a few things. So one, you're looking at the compressive strength of the ground and what is actually in that strata. So an engineer would come out on site with a bore and would effectively go down. They do two different things. A bore would go down, and then they would create some trial pits where they would actually dig out an area and examine the actual ground itself. They would take samples of that. The third thing that they would do at that time is they would test the percolation of the ground, so the porosity of the ground. What happens when you fill one of these trial pits up with water? How long does it actually, so there's a stopwatch, how long does it actually take to discharge into the ground itself? Depending on the result of that, will depending on the drainage solution that you ultimately come up with. And again, all these things are designed to do one simple thing. They're designed to keep you safe, to make sure that your buildings are satisfactory for mortgage purposes ultimately, and that ideally they're not going to fall down. That's the kind of key thing. Make sure that you're building on something, on a strata that is, and the foundation solution that you've got is appropriate for the strata that you're building on. So that's really construction due diligence in terms of the planning and in terms of building regulations. When it comes to actually on-site due diligence, you've got the point, so it's then the third thing is contractor due diligence. So the contractor that you're going to appoint he needs to be ideally appropriately sized for the project that you've got and have a track record of doing the same thing before, same or similar thing before. And then thirdly, should always be in the right form of contractual relationship with yourself. So let's cover the third thing first, contractual relationship. What does that mean? Well, in the UK, we're very fortunate that we have a series of contracts, primarily sort of JCT government-based contracts. So these contracts are available for all manner of different construction things, whether the contractor is doing some of the design, whether some of his subcontractors are doing some of the design, or whether indeed he has a full list and a full package that he is designing to. So the contracts are very specific for that. But really, from the point of view of diligence, what you want to ensure that you're getting is you're getting a fixed price, a fixed timeline, and that there are penalties in place if the contractor doesn't perform. These things are kind of pretty much critical. So at the point at which you're ready to start on site and do the construction, what you've got lined up behind you is you've got this mass of information. So you've got all your planning conditions have been satisfied as conditions precedent, they're all in place. You've got your building regulations where you've done all your surveys and you've looked specifically at the types of building that you're doing, and the contractor knows and understands these, and you've got a contractor in position, ready to go, who is fully aware of what he's got to build, has agreed with your price for doing that build, and a timeline for budget for actually producing the build. And then finally, there is a kind of stick style incentive to ensure that he finishes on time. So if you put all these things into place, which is the kind of policy that we operate, then you are at best place from a construction point of view to stay safe and deliver a successful project.